So, our special guest today is Brandon Willis. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. And I hear congratulations is in order because you are now Psychotoxins editor. Is that correct?
Yes, as of yesterday on the 25th, I am now the editor for the young adult section that we just started.
That's brilliant. Congratulations.
Thank you.
So, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got started in writing?
Well, my mom told me that ever since I was able to talk, that I was telling her stories. And that just transitioned over when I started being able to write around kindergarten. I remember having like those big wide sheets of paper with the big wide rule on it for like little kids to learn how to write. And I remember
Yeah.
like jotting down stories instead of writing down the sentences they wanted us to do.
So, what drew you to the horror genre?
um, I think probably because when I was a kid, that was like one of the forbidden genres of movies and TV. So like it felt like a little, risque to
Yeah.
read horror and watch horror movies and stuff. And when I was an adult, that was all I wanted to do was just watch horror movies, read horror books, and eventually I read Stephen King's On Writing, and he in one part of the book he said something like, "If you don't like what you're reading, then try writing it yourself." So I was like, hmm. So I just started writing stories, and I wanted to write stories that I would like to read, which is one of the tips that
Yeah.
he also put in that book is, just write what you love and write what you know.
Yeah. So, what was the first horror story that you wrote?
Oh, Lord. I think it was, so there's an old urban legend that comes around the US and I think parts of the UK too about seeing a white dog as an omen of death. And
Mm.
I read something I probably read it honestly, something about that. And that was what inspired the idea. So I wrote a story about a little Scottish terrier that this person kept seeing. And every time they saw them, somebody in their family died.
Yeah. How did that go down?
That was not the best story, but the people that I showed, they were like, "Oh, that's pretty good. You should keep writing." And I can't find it anymore because I was going to put it in my first collection. I was going to rewrite it and make it sound better, but I couldn't find it. So I guess it's just lost to the oblivion now.
Oh, bless. That's a shame. So, walk us through your process for developing a story. Where'd you get your ideas from?
They can come from anywhere. They can just like, sometimes I'll be in the shower and I'll be thinking of like something like a family member might be going through or a friend or something. An idea might come from that, or it could be from an article that I've read. It could be from some event happening. Like one of the most recent ones was a story that I wrote called "I Knew a Kid Who Ate Worms," and that idea came from me telling someone a story about a kid that I knew back in kindergarten who uh, I remember seeing him eat worms on a regular basis on the playground, and everybody like made fun of him and talked about how gross it was. And I was like, what if someone took this a step further and like kept doing it for much
Yeah.
further, and eventually they would use that as like a torture method. That was where that story came from.
Lovely eating worms.
Uh-huh. My sister did that. I didn't do that, but I remember she was like 2 years old, maybe. I remember we were playing outside and she shoved a worm in her mouth. And I went running to my parents. I was like, she's eating worms. She's eating worms.
So, how do you create compelling characters for your horror stories?
I try to relate them to people that I actually have know or have met, or maybe bad people from stories or real life events like serial killers or something. I watch a lot of true crime, and some of the shows they go really deep into their psyche about why they do things and like their childhood and the things that led up to them becoming horrible people like that. And sometimes those types of shows actually inspire the villains in my stories.
Yeah. So are
So I
you a
think to have a
pantser?
good, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, sorry, I interrupted. I do apologize.
Oh, you're okay. I was going to say that I think a good villain should also have a good backstory. So that's where that comes
Yeah.
from.
So are you a pantser or a plotter?
What is it?
Are you a plotter or a pantser?
That is a good question. I think it just depends. Like what instance?
Do you plot your stories or do you sort of like start from the first sentence and just carry on
Oh,
going, but don't?
sometimes it's not even that. Sometimes it's just like I'll get an idea for a title, like a phrase will pop into my head. I'll take that and write the whole story just around that, the title that comes in my head. Um, Sometimes though, I will do a whole outline, like with the novel that I've been working on. I have a pretty lengthy outline that I end up changing on a pretty frequent basis. So, and then I also have a novella that I'm working on that I don't have an outline for, that I'm kind of just going with the flow. So it just really depends.
Depends on your mood for that day, yeah.
Yeah, how my brain's working.
So, are any of the characters or plots inspired by your own experience or fears?
Yes. Just about every story that I write has at least a little bit of something from my psyche in there. Like I have a fear of dolls going back to when I was a little kid, like especially porcelain dolls. Those things freak me
Yeah,
out.
yeah, they are
It's
freaky.
because my grandma used to collect weird little dolls. There were these dolls in America that were popular back in the 80s and 90s. They were like child size. They were like 3 or 4 feet tall, and they would dress them like little kids, and they would put them in the corner of the room. It would look like they're playing peekaboo. I don't remember what the name of the dolls were, but they were so creepy. And she had a little boy that was in the far end of her, I guess you would call it a den in her house. But it would just sit there, and it was right behind her TV. So like as I was watching TV, my eye would wander over there and see that little doll, and it would just be like, I hope that thing doesn't move.
Yeah, dolls are creepy. Yeah, I
Oh,
agree.
yes.
So, what's the hardest part about writing in the horror genre?
Probably originality, because there are so many tropes that are just done over and over again. It's hard to come up with something that you think is new and original, something that will attract people. You could always go for like a good, haunted house book, or a demon possession book, or a serial killer book. But I feel like if you're going to do that, you have to add a little bit of your own flavor to it to attract people.
Yeah,
Um, like with haunted house, like maybe you could twist that into being it's not actually a ghost; they're seeing themselves from the past or the future. Make a twist like that instead of just being the classic trope of, oh, there's someone was murdered in the house and now they're haunting it. That stuff
yeah,
just bores me. So, like Stephen King said, write what you like and what you want to read. So that's what I try really hard to do. There's a lot of stories that I have just started and just left them on the back burner because I don't feel like they're original enough. They're just too tropey, or I just don't like them. So they just sit there forever.
So, what's been the most difficult story or scene that you've ever had to write?
um, Usually it happens around like the midpoint of the book or story. Either way, it's like when everything is coming together. I feel like that's one of the most difficult parts of a story, because you have to weave the story right at that point, or else you're going to have a lot of people just putting the book away and not wanting to read it anymore because it's just boring or predictable, or it's just not well written because of the way that things are brought together. Because it's important, especially when you're writing a novel, when you have multiple storylines coming together, that they all come together at the right place. Otherwise, it's just not going to be a good book.
Yeah, it's very true. So, which is your most popular book, and why do you think it's been so popular?
um, well, I'm on my second book, so my first book technically is the most popular because I've sold the most of those so far, and I think it's mostly just because it's a pretty comprehensive well, not an anthology, but a collection of my short stories. It spans everything that I wrote from 2013 until February. Yeah, February of this year. So it's about 10 years worth of short stories. It's not
Mm.
all of them, 'cause I left a lot out, but it's 40 altogether. It's a pretty long book. It's over 400 pages, but it covers a lot. It's not just horror, but it's also sci-fi. And there's
Yeah.
some in there that are just general fiction that I liked that I stuck in there.
So, have you had any memorable feedback on this one?
I was actually surprised at all the positive feedback on it because I'm so critical on myself. I was expecting a lot of
Yeah.
negativity and a lot of one stars, but so far the worst one I've had is a 4 star. So that's a good thing.
Yeah, that's a really good thing. But I suppose we are very critical of ourselves and what we write. We seem to criticize it more than what the general reader does.
Yes, yeah, that's true.
So, have you got any exciting projects that you're currently working on? I know you said you're working on one book. Have you got anything else in the pipeline?
Yeah, I have. I'm working on a novel and a novella right now at the same time. I can tell you a little bit about the two. The novel is I wanted to do a tribute to all of the what they're called kids on bike stories from the 80s and 90s of like a group of kids riding on bicycles and solving some mystery in their town. Remember the movie Stand By Me?
Yeah.
Yeah, like that, like it, like those types of movies and books. So I wanted to do a tribute to those. That book is going to be about kids finding out that a horrible tragedy in their hometown turns out to be something that they never expected. So
Yeah.
that's been fun to write so far. It's also been difficult because I'm at the point in the book, I'm like near the middle part. So
It's
that's
getting
been the toughest part to
challenging.
write so far of that one. Um, the novella is actually an idea that I had because I'm from West Virginia, and the most famous cryptid here is Mothman. So I wanted to do a Mothman story, but I want to try to keep it as accurate to the original sightings of Mothman as possible. So I've been reading a lot of firsthand accounts and researching. I actually don't live very far away from where that actually happened at. It's like 30 minutes away from me.
Yeah.
So I can drive up there and look at the museum and stuff that they have if I need to. That's been fun. It's about a kid who suddenly starts seeing Mothman, and Mothman starts warning him about a horrible event that's going to happen in his life. And eventually does happen, but I don't want to give away the rest of the plot. Not yet.
Of course. So, if you were to give some advice to someone who was wanting to write for the horror genre, what advice would you give them?
Well, best advice that probably everyone else says is read a lot of horror and read a lot of different genres. Don't just read, what you're used to. Go outside of your comfort zone and read other books. Like if you just like general horror, like haunted houses and creature horror, we'll start read some splatterpunk. Maybe you'll like that, or some extreme horror. Read some, possession stories. Read some paranormal stories, some supernatural cryptid stories. Just try to try to read as much as you can. That way you can absorb everything and that way you also get a good idea of what you don't like. That way you can avoid accidentally writing that, or
Yeah.
at least you know for certain that you don't like that.
Yeah, that's right. So, lastly, where can listeners find your books, Brandon?
Um, the first one is on Amazon and Barnes and Noble. You can go there and get those worldwide. The
Mhm.
second one, my second collection that just came out, it's called An Inspiration for Your Nightmares. That one just came out 2 days ago on the 24th of October. You can right now that one's just available on Amazon, but you can get it for Kindle or for in paperback form.
Fantastic. That's brilliant. Well, thank you very much for coming on the show. It's been a pleasure having you here. Is there anything else that you would like to add?
I just want to add, don't forget to check out Psychotoxin books and keep an eye out for the new young adult books that are coming out because there's going to be quite a bit of those in the future, I hope.
And where can you find the psychotoxin books?
You can either go to psychotoxin.com or go on Amazon. We have a whole store on there.
That's fantastic. Well, thank you once again, Brandon. It's been lovely.